Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Matteo. I know you've not been home in about 3 weeks and just
Almost
been flying
3
around the
weeks.
world. So.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
I'm so excited for this conversation because,
Likewise.
as Imran said, it's such an interesting time to be focusing on this topic. But I sort of want to go back before we go forward, because you didn't start focused on sustainability. You
Nope.
started in much more conventional retail.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you started to want to work in this space.
Well, I think it's a journey of life, right? Yeah, you do experiences, you make mistakes, you learn, you make mistakes again, then you learn and you grow, and eventually you become more aware and you want to act on that awareness. And also the fact that I did not want to work in fashion, I wanted to work in politics. Actually, did you know when your parents ask you when you're a child, what do you want to do when you grow up? There's videos of mini-me saying, I wanted to become the president of the United States of America. So,
It's quite different kind of vibe at the moment there.
precisely, but I think that's why then I found my way to actually use fashion as a tool.
But you started out in conventional retail at Abercrombie.
That's what happened. I started when I was really young at Abercrombie Fitch. Big brand, and throughout my 20s, it was the dream job. I was in a very successful career. I was having a lot of fun. But when you get more into the role, I started to gradually visualize and see some of the true hidden costs of what I was doing. I became co-chair of Diversity and Inclusion Council, and I started to understand better what inclusion really meant, what integration really meant, how can you play the Diversity Inclusion Council card if you don't know who make your clothes. If, to your point, you don't get yourself on that crossroad and have the ability to talk to the women and the people that make your garments and include them in the conversation. And then Rana Plaza collapses, 2013. Big tragedy that for most of us in the industry have, had a dramatic impact. For me, that was the moment when I started to understand what social justice meant, how important it is to put the people who make our clothes in the economic and psychological conditions to be able to afford the ecological transition. Otherwise, as we've heard earlier, there's not going to be sustainability in fashion. And then I remember precisely was at the end of 2014. Jeans, big product for ours. And I started to have people complaining about eczemas and dermatitis caused by the dyes in our clothes. So I started to understand what was the impact, environmental impact and health impact of having poor, unhealthy clothes in our stores. And that, for me, was the game changer. I remember I was sitting in a room with our executive vice president and my boss, and everybody was like getting me ready for a promotion, actually in the region here in the UAE. And I was like, I quit. I was like, what do you do? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I know why I'm going to do it. I walked out of the room. I felt super bold. I was like, I just did it. And then I was like, panic. I was like, what do I do now? I actually, fun fact, when you quit a job and you're excited, but you don't really know whether it was the right decision, you kind of like leave a door open to go back into it. There were a couple of things that gave me a lot of strength back then. It was 2015. And I remember just walking into the session. One of them was an article written on business of fashion. It was April or March 2015. And I remember the title was, what are going to be the biggest changes in the industry in the next 10 years? And there was a list of 10, and one of them was sustainability, and that was like, there you go. I can prove my parents that I'm on the right track and they should support me on this.
So this is full circle now.
This is full circle. I quit my job. I started an entrepreneurial career. I opened up an educational platform first that continues to operate across the world in 143 countries under Inside Out right now, teaching and inspiring children to look and see value in what we wear, making sure they look at clothes with the same eyes they look at food, because they interact with our skin. They have an impact on our health, and we shouldn't waste food. So why we waste clothes? And this continues to operate in collaboration with the United Nations and the FAO. Then I created an innovative startup to understand really, because I became hungry with solutions. So I wanted to figure out how to really mitigate the impact of what we were doing and maximize the social impact. So started to collaborate and co-patent technologies around this field. And then as a young and experienced entrepreneur, I almost went bankrupt. And I was like, how do I bring sustainability, economic sustainability into this? And I created a design and consulting studio that started to really work back then. It was 2019, with some of the top luxury brands. Some of them, you've named them already. We all know them. That back then, we're really starting to understand how to embed sustainability into their business strategy, how to embed a more responsible vision into their product development strategy and communication strategy to drive forward better habits, because that's at the end of the day another big challenge of ours.
So it's been a decade working in this space on these topics. And I think it's really interesting because when you first started, and we've talked about this, it was a much more exuberant time. You know, companies were making these big commitments for the first time. There was this belief that consumers really wanted sustainable fashion and it would drive more sales and you'd have this wonderful virtuous circle. Now, you know, you're a few months into Inside Out, hundreds of millions of dollars that you're going to put into trying to build this, you know, sustainable brands. But the landscape is much bleaker. There's doubt over whether or not consumers are willing to spend more on a product that's more sustainable. There's, you know, huge pressure on supply chains because of all of the economic instability we're seeing. Sustainability investments broadly are falling by the wayside. Where do you see the opportunities right now?
I think we see it even as a bigger opportunity. If we don't do it, who does it? If the private sector doesn't take the lead, who will? If the fashion industry doesn't use its power to inspire better habits and better habitats, we are that one industry in the world that with a stroke of genius can influence people more than hundreds of conferences on climate change. If we don't use all of that to shift patterns, can we be here talking about fashion, not just sustainable fashion, but fashion really? I don't think so. So with Inside Out is really the opportunity to drive forward that change and let the private sector lead that change. One of the opportunities that you mentioned challenges and problems. I think wherever there's a problem and a challenge, there's an opportunity to actually create value if someone else hasn't yet looked at it from a different angle. And when in the fashion system, now I'm talking broadly, I talk to my teams all the times about this and other colleagues. We're a very fashion-centric system, we've always been. It's like the Copernican revolution didn't touch us, right? We think fashion, the sun is fashion and everybody else gravitates around it. It's the time to zoom out, to stop, to listen, to get at that crossroad and enable ourselves to talk to the global south, to talk to the people, understand what the real needs of the world are, what the real needs of the ecosystems we touch are, what the real needs of consumers are. When you do that, two things can happen. Either you get overwhelmed by the challenge and you just step back and like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this? So you just keep your feet on the status quo and just head down and go down. Or you say, well, maybe I have an opportunity to create another relevant brand that for the next 100, 200 years will lead the change, and this is what we're doing. Some of the opportunities I see, the first one, well, I just came back from a big trip, intense trip to India. I've traveled a lot as you know, Chile, Ghana, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and India being one of the most, the mothership of textile and dyes for many aspects is very close to our heart and to our operations. Now, when I'm there, it's fascinating talking to the farmers, talking to the people who make our clothes, really going back to the seed before I look at the garment, and how much value can be created if designs didn't start in design rooms in Milan, where I'm from, or New York or Paris, but started in the farm, in the soil. How much value can be created if you operate at the intersection of food and fiber, where there's the opportunity to get more benefits from a single hectare and create intersectional, cross-sector, synergistic economies, symbiotic economies for everybody. How much value can be created when you put your supply chain, again, in the conditions to be able to become a partner, to invest with you and want to walk with you, not in the redefinition of how to make a t-shirt with organic cotton, but in the mission to redefine the role of this industry in the 21st century. As an environmentalist and activist, I am excited when I do these kind of things because I see the opportunity to really mitigate the pressure on our planetary boundaries. As an empathic man, I think I am. I get excited because when I talk to the farmers about these opportunities, I see their eyes just lighting up again. and actually refining love in this incredible cultural industry that we are. But as an entrepreneur, I get even more excited because I see the opportunity of shaping new markets, creating value where there's not yet, redefining legitimacy for an industry that today struggles, to Imran's point, to find a legitimate position. We produce 100 billion garments a year. Who needs another t-shirt? But we all need better brands to create better systems, better infrastructure, and shape better habits. The brand's role is another one, a huge opportunity, right? We see it every day. I've heard it before. There's fatigue, there's stress. Even ourselves, I'll speak for my network. We're all just tired. We have to design, we have to produce. But when you start from a moment of listening and your design thinking process starts from the desire to address some of the most pressing social and environmental challenges, and you stop and listen and investigate in everything you do in the company, not just the office dedicated to the capsule collection, but everyone in the company starts really working in that direction, not only there are a lot of opportunities for the companies to really retain talent and get excitement up again, but there's the opportunity to redefine legitimacy and relevance in what we're doing. Again, there's no difference between what we're all wearing here and what we have for lunch an hour ago. Everything we're wearing comes from the same essential resources: air, water, land, energy. Now, the difference between this and what we ate, I cannot eat this. And there's billions of people around the world right now that are struggling, that have no access to water, food scarcity, food security. So if we're still going to enjoy this industry, if we're still going to be wearing clothes because it's appropriate and we need it, we better figure out the way to make it relevant, find new functionality for our clothes. And the one question I always ask, I wake up with this question, and I go to my teams every day with this question, is like, what can a t-shirt do that it hasn't done before? Because if you are designing another t-shirt for one of our brands, you better work to make sure that it's doing something that hasn't done before, that has more function, more value, more relevance to more people that you have ever thought about, and not just that consumer that comes from a marketing target strategy that you have fantastically designed. Otherwise, I don't see how this industry can become sustainable again. And it's worth trying. Sorry, but despite everything that we've said, I know the circumstances these days are not fantastic, but I think we are all, and I'm speaking about us collectively, in agreement when I say that there's still a lot of beauty in this world worth fighting for. And if we don't take that fight up for ourselves, then who will?
Well, let's talk a little bit about why this is going to be hard right now. Because I think what you've said touches on so many things that in the moment when you say them will resonate with a lot of people. But then, as you also said, everyone goes back to their day job. Things are so tricky at the moment. You just kind of put your head down and try and get things done and meet the next quarter's demands. And at the same time, led by the US at the moment, there is a backlash against a lot of this stuff. Funding is being cut for climate work. It's unclear where other consumers will land around the world. It's unclear how that will filter into the way the rest of the world approaches these topics. You know, how do you, as a brand, combat that?
As our brands and as a holding company, it's for us an opportunity to really step it up and lead that change and take the lead. And it's an opportunity for all of us, I think, to come together and think for these events, because refining a position at the crossroad to be able to collectively speak and take a leadership position in creating better systems and the better world that we think we all aspire to, it's our responsibility. And if we don't do it, then who will? If we don't care, then who cares? If we don't design these better systems, then who, again, will? The majority of the problems of the world come from poorly made decisions, which is good news, because a poorly made decision is not something that you cannot change. It's a decision. You can erase it, take it again, and change it. We're just letting other people take the decisions. It's time to step it up. And we see that as an opportunity for the private sector in this moment. And actually, to be honest, when you published that article with the Business of Fashion about our investment.
Right, and just to give a little bit of context, yeah. You guys launched, what, 2 months ago?
Precisely.
And we ran a story announcing the launch.
And we announced that we're actually investment and interest, and that we're building a system dedicated to sustainability. And this happened right in the middle of everything that's happening. So a lot of people were like, huh, as you asked, how does this play out in a very critical time in history? In exactly the way we all expected. We had a lot of people reaching out and saying, this is a breath of fresh air. This is positive news. This is the kind of hope. I don't like the word hope, but this is the kind of examples that, again, will strengthen and will inspire, hopefully, a lot of us to continue in this road, because if we don't do it now more than ever, it will be very hard 4 years from now or 8 years from now to pick it up and get to the kind of build the kind of systems that this world needs to move on and I guess redefine really the role.
So what you're hearing is that even though a lot of the headlines are quite bleak, there is hunger for this kind of thing still.
100%. 100%. We see it in every country we go. We see it in the people. We see it in the students when we talk in schools and have educational workshops, when we speak to kids age 5 to 10 or students age 15 to 18, all the way to entrepreneurs, a CEO, investment funds. There's not just hunger, but there's the awareness that when there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. And this is probably in this, if we feel like there's a crisis and you feel a little uncertain about the future, I would say you're in the right moment, because this is precisely the kind of feeling that we need to have.
This is disruptive, so you need to be uncomfortable.
Look, when I was with an artist called Michelangelo Pistoletto once, and he told me, Matteo, stand up. I was like, I did it, all right. If you're standing up, are you in balance? Yes. Are you moving forward? No. Okay, try to move forward. Stop. And I almost fell, right? But it was like, that's the point. There's no way of moving forward and evolving unless you put yourself in that little unbalanced situation and you find a way to steer forward. And maybe it's a little step, but it will continue to move on. And we learn this as we're children. We're brave enough to find the way to bridge the gap between a status quo, I'm not walking, and the ambition, I want to get there.
That's less far to fall when you're a child, though.
What?
You don't fall as far when you're a child.
True. But then you build networks, and this is why platforms like this as well are helpful to not make sure you're not falling.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about the approach you're taking with Inside Out is that it's holistic. So although you're building brands, you're not just looking at the brand itself, you're going back into the supply chain, you're looking at the root of the issues and trying to tackle those. We are very tight on time, but in 30 seconds, can you give a little bit of an overview of that philosophy of how you connect what you do to actually make an impact and solve a problem to how you make people excited about what you're doing at the consumer level?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to tackle some of the biggest environmental social challenges, and we do it by working across 6 sectors and divisions. Fashion textiles is one, but it's also wellness, media, education, science research and technology, and food. And within all of these sectors, we're very well aware that our primary job at the end of the day is not just to create better products, but to shape better habits through better communication strategies. The link, really, a self-realizing action such as health to a positive environmental and social impact, with the understanding and awareness that sustainability is the goal. And right now what we're doing is continue to work to mitigate as much as we can the environmental impact of our actions, maximize our social impact, starting from the supply chain, because if you don't put, again, the people who make us possible every single day in the conditions to do what I've just said and get equally excited about our products as we are, then it will be really hard to get to where we need to go.
Well, thank you so much for talking us through this, Matteo. Really appreciate it, and I know there's a lot more to come.
Thank you so much.